Hello, I'm Nelson Ford with the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. And today we're actually going to talk about one of my favorites. I love peacemakers, but I grew up on K-22s. Of course, the K-Frame was designed in the late 1800s, like 86, 84, somewhere in there. But they came out with the I-frame first and then the K-frame in 1899. I-frame in 1896. But the 22 has been a piece of history for Smith & Wesson forever. This little tip up is from the 1860s, I think 1863. It's in 22. 40 years later, we had the Lady Smith. 1901 to 1921, right in there. Tiny little gun. You have to see it next to a K-frame to get the idea of the difference. And then, of course, the I-frame, which came out in 1908, but of course the 4-inch I-frames weren't available until 1935. It's another 40 years apart from the the Lady. So then, so much demand was on Smith & Wesson because the K-frame was winning matches. And in the 32 and the 38, it was doing so well. And it fit the hand, it was light, it was perfect. And so 1927, the firm started working on their first K-22. And we know them all with the ribbons down the barrels. But actually, the first ones that came out in 1931, they had a round barrel. Of course, the grip adapters were available in the 30s for these guns. 6-shot, 35 ounces. It's a little heavier than the 38 or the 32 because less metal is cut away. But of course, it was after 1926, 27, so it had the reduced size knob on the ejector rod, but still bigger than the post-war. These guns were wonderful, and they made 19,000 plus, almost 20,000. In the last 1,000, they put the new rear sight on, which you can see on the 4-inch here, the sight that we're all familiar with today. They made 1,076 second model. So this is the first model, and the second model has the new sight, and it also had a hammer with a stop in it. And I have one here. We're going to get a picture of it on an early post-war gun. So it had the short action on the second model and the new sight, which was really great stuff. It was the first gun to sport the new sight and the short action. Of course, we know the short action on the end frame wasn't introduced till much later after the war. In fact, they still used up the long actions from 46 to 49, and then started the short actions on the end frame in 1950. And so these are really cool. This is called the Outdoorsman, K-22 Outdoorsman, and it had a lot of wonderful features. After the war, I should talk about this guy first. This is a 4-inch Outdoorsman. They made 250. This is not one of the factory-made 250s out of the 19,000 plus. You could mail your gun off to King Sight Company, and they would lop 2 inches off the barrel and put this barrel band that housed the sight on the front of your barrel, giving you a more handy gun to work with. I've only seen one in person at a Phoenix gun show at the fairgrounds, and the guy had it in a glass case 10 or 15 years ago for $2,500. And I asked him if he could do any better than that, and he said no, and I just knew that I'm a K-22 guy. You gotta have this gun. I have a credit card with that much room on it. I said, I'll take it. And he said, well, I don't think I really want to sell it. I said, well, you have it for sale here. And he says, no, I just really have it for display. I just want people to know what it's worth. And I said, well, it's worth more than that. What will you take? And he said, I'm not prepared to sell it. Give me your phone number and I'll call you if I ever think about selling it. Never heard from him. But this is a 4-incher in beautiful shape. Then we go to after the war. You know what? The 4-inchers weren't available right at first. They first came out with the 6-inchers after the war, and they called them the K-22 Masterpiece. And they called it the Masterpiece because it had the new sight, the short action, and the full rib. They were just wonderful guns. My dad had one of these, very early one, and we had it nickel plated. It's over there. I'm going to show you in a minute. But this one here got a Tyler T on it. They didn't come with Tyler T's, but it's a nice feature if you're going to want to keep the wood on your gun, keep it looking original. Put a Tyler T in there, and it lowers you and puts you in line with the trigger rather than being above it, you're behind it. But these guns were just wonderful. They sold like hotcakes. They came out in '46. They already had the short action on them. New sight, of course, the rib. Interesting thing about the rib, it's a tapered rib originally after the war, and I think there are 8 grooves across here to make it line up with the rear sight. The sight has grooves in it as well. What you may not know is it's a tapered rib, and so you run out of room. You're not going to have 8 grooves up front, and when we get a closer picture on it, you're going to see that it goes from 8 grooves to 6 grooves, which is kind of crazy, but it's true. Anyway, they made 311 in '46, and they really hit the catalog in '47. And in '47, I can't remember how many they made, but they made tens of thousands, and they cranked them out. And by the mid '50s, they had cranked out 200,000 of them, and they were a wonderful seller. And then they were talked into doing a 4-inch. And the 4-inch, since it's easier to draw, they called it the K-22 Combat Masterpiece, or K-22 CM. And the barrel is not long enough to show the taper on the rib, so it goes 8 grooves all the way up from the sight all the way up to the other sight. But the 4-inches are wonderful. One of the things I should have mentioned is right after the war, they started with these sledgehammers, and I never got the full story on them. Oh, that's actually got a micro hammer, a copy of a King hammer on this gun, and we'll get a picture of that for you. It's, I think, one of only 2 I've ever seen in my life, these micro hammers. They're a copy of the King Sight Company cockeyed hammer. But at any rate, they had this swedged hammer, and they made the hammers out of, carbon steel, hammer forged carbon steel, machined to tolerances, and then before they hardened this, they pressed it in a press, and they gave it that little flip up, and they call it the swedge hammer. And I like them because the way your thumb can get over them, and it makes it easy to cock the hammer back. And but by 1957 they were gone, and that's when they started applying model numbers. This would have been the Model 18. It's got the target grips on it, which is a great feature to have with it. Another feature I didn't mention, where is it on? And it's number 3255, I think, 32 and change. Anyway, post-war, so it's early 1947, very early 47. Of course, it's got the swedge hammer. But what I wanted to show you was there was, and I think I showed you in another K-Frame video, that there is the large knob that they used from 1927 to World War II, and they still had some left over, and they had to get rid of them. And so they went ahead and they had to cut the barrel away for it, and the large knob fits right in there. The other thing is they were still using up hammers from the second model, and it had a stop in it because that's the short action. And there is a shelf right here behind the hammer spur on this gun with a little stop for the action, so it only goes back so far. It's got a King mirrored front sight on it with a red square, and it's got a Tyler T. People have asked me to do videos on these, and the Tyler T's are simply stated. I don't know a lot about the company. They used to come in 2-piece boxes with a little letter about how God can save you, and then the 2-piece box went to a box that opened from one end, and then I think Grandpa or Dad gave it to the kid, and his wife used to get them done and anodized and polish them and ship them out, and then I don't know what happened after that. This is an early post-war big knob on the front here, and it's got the stop on the back of the hammer shelf. This is a very early K-22 masterpiece. And of course it goes from 6 grooves down, or from 8 grooves down to 6. The rib tapers. Cool stuff. I love these guns. One interesting, really cool feature about the post-war K-22s is the Boston PD only ordered 20. The New York Police Department ordered some, we don't know how many. And the U.S. Coast Guard ordered fixed sight K-22s. I didn't even know these things existed until about 25 years ago when a friend of mine came to my shop with a 6-incher, which is rarer than the 4. But these were used by the Post Office, U.S. Coast Guard, Boston PD, and New York Police Department for trainers because they were cheap to shoot. You stuck 22s in there. A brick, when I was growing up, a brick was less than $5, and you could have a hell of a time to shoot all afternoon and not go through all the ammo. And if you had, thousands of police officers on your force, all you needed was about 10 of these things and run them through and get them shooting the 22s, and you're not having 38 specials. And years ago, police departments used to have guys that reloaded the 38 specials. They get stuck in the barrels, blah, blah, blah. But the K-22 made a nice trainer, fixed sight. All you need to do is put a little orange paint up here and be just to run this thing right into the ground with all your officers. I do have an extreme example here. This is I got to thank the people that loaned me these guns. This is a King Sight Company altered K-22, a very unusual piece to come by. This particular one has Roper grips on it. King ventilated rib, has a little mirror lighting up the front sight. Sights were easily interchanged with red, white, and a gold square, or you could get beads, little circular expressed beads, or you could get a McGivern gold bead. The hammers were cockeyed to one side or the other, or both sides. They had lots of features like that. Some of them had short actions on them. This one does not. It cocks all the way back. But that's an extreme example. Anyway, there's a lot to cover here. There's a lot of good stories behind these things. I've had a hell of a time. My brother-in-law and I just used to just go out and, we did everything wrong. We didn't bring water, and we didn't wear hats, and we went out in the middle of the day with a brick of ammunition each, and we'd drive out to the middle of the desert and shoot it up. And that's what we used, K-22s, and it gave me the discipline on double action shooting that I used to shoot down at Cactus Combat League at the National Guard Armory, and we had other events around. There were some in Wickenburg. I used to drive over to Rio Salado. There were also shoots. Gosh, there was one right up north of town. They have a whole neighborhood put in there now. The Sportsman. I used to shoot the Sportsman. I shot at South Mountain. That's still there. And I learned today from a guy that worked for the newspaper and knew Ben Avery. And he talked about somehow they used to shoot at someplace, and the state needed that for something. I can't remember, some facility, and they gave them. Oh, they used to shoot near the airport, and they that's where the range was, and they needed that during World War II, and so they sent them down to South Mountain and gave them that plot down there to set up a shooting range. That's how long that shooting range has been there. But at any rate, we've covered a lot of Smiths. The 22s are wonderful. For those that want to stuff magazines, that's okay. Woodsmans are fun. The Rugers are fun. But if you don't want to stuff magazines all day and your rounds to go flying on the next table, You can shoot revolvers, and the K-22 Smith is the best. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them to me, and I'll answer them when I get a chance. Hope you enjoyed the video.